All right. Well, as you see, I'm here with my boy, Charles Haywood. I love the man, love having him on the show. Before we get started, let me tell you about expatmoneysummit.com, the world's largest offshore event taking place entirely online from October 7th to 11th, put on by Mikhail Thorup, host of the Expat Money Show, and a highly sought after expat consultant with over 2 decades of experience. Discover why international diversification is a must for those looking to preserve their liberty and wealth. Learn everything you need to know about crafting your perfect plan B, how to quickly acquire a second passport, diversify your finances offshore, invest in international real estate, and get in depth insights on geopolitics from world renowned experts. Dr. Ron Paul, Doug Casey, Scott Horton, Tom Woods, Mark Faber, Tom Luongo are all speakers at the expatmoneysummit.com. So go to the expatmoneysummit.com and sign up for your free tickets for the 4-day conference, October 7th through 11th. That's expatmoneysummit.com. So go check it out. LibertarianInstitute.org is holding a fund drive right now. We're accepting donations in order to keep the podcast and the books flowing. So go to libertarianinstitute.org, donate. We have up to $10,000 matching donations right now. So if you give $10, it will actually be 20 that you're giving. So go double your donations at the libertarianinstitute.org and keep us rolling online. All right, Charles, we're here. We're doing it. It's happening. Let's go.
Let's see. Let's go.
That's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about happening, man. Like with all the crazy stuff that's been going on in the world of politics, I was like, there's got to be some happenings. I got to get Charles Haywood on because it's happening.
Well, I am a happenings guy, though I'm not I'm not a maximalist happenings guy. I
Right.
understand that many things which appear to be happenings or appear to be likely to be happenings are not in fact happenings, or in other words, happenings can only be correctly identified in retrospect. But we certainly have had many happenings. Obviously, the biggest one is the attempted assassination of Trump and so on, and there's been many other happenings. So the opposite mistake, of course, is to think that anything short of global nuclear apocalypse is not a happening. And so if anyone's still alive, there must not have been a happening. So I mean that's clearly not right as well. We are in the happening times. That is definitely true.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the assassination attempt. What do you make of that? Because I mean, obviously, I'm one of those JFK guys. That's kind of how I got introduced into politics was um, Oliver Stone. So that was
Sure.
kind of like my introduction when I was 12 years old, and going, that's bullshit. That didn't happen like that. And so when I look at what they're calling failures or incompetence, I'm like, that's planned. There's no way that was an accident. But what
Well,
what else what else are you seeing in this whole scenario?
I'm historically somewhat skeptical of broad-based conspiracies because it just seems human nature being what it is. There always comes a point over the course of years, in particular, where some person finds it more to his advantage to give up the conspiracy than to continue the conspiracy. For example, I mean, the classic example of that is obviously someone who's trying to get right with God on his deathbed, and he's like, "Well, I better talk about this thing now." So. I, I'm of mixed mind about the Kennedy assassination. We'll get to the Trump here in a minute. It's certainly possible, but and there's certainly a lot of very suspicious things surrounding it. So if I was a betting man, I would say the Kennedy assassination may be an exception to the general rule that conspiracies are not capable of being executed over decades. For the same reason, I reject kind of like the Illuminati, right? Like there's like these secret generations of people in some European fastness executing some plan that their ancestors came up with. I mean, it doesn't make any sense ultimately. I mean, there's less extreme variations on that claim, and we can go through them. But the
Mm,
Trump thing is interesting to me on many levels. I certainly agree with the statement that it looks planned, or at least the emissions look planned in a way that the emissions were hoped to add up to an actual successful assassination. I think that I think it's hard to say. I think the most interesting and some ways disheartening thing is the total failure of uh, the Republican Party, as opposed to the right, to take advantage of this in a way that makes it obvious that they're attempting to stab us in the back. So the when the Speaker of the House announces a task force, whatever they're calling it, whose report is due after the election. I mean, that's clearly a traitorous act designed to minimize the impact on the election rather than releasing it 10 days before the election in order to maximize the electoral benefit. So obviously, for whatever reason, the Speaker of the House and the Republican Party is in on wanting to ensure this doesn't benefit Trump in any way. That doesn't, of course, mean that they were in on some conspiracy to execute it, but it does mean that everyone is aligned. Fundamentally, that all these people are aligned with the desire that it should have been successful, and they would be much
Mm.
happier if it had been successful, whether those people are Republicans or Democrats. The degree to which it was planned, I mean, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of suspicious things about the movements of the shooter and all these kind of things, and the fact that no one is actually looking into it except random people online is just indicative of where we are. But I mean, it's indicative of where we are, not that there's a conspiracy, but it's indicative of where we are in the same way that we have the stupid Kamala Harris campaign going on, where she doesn't actually show up anywhere or talk to anybody. It's a virtual fake campaign, and no one, everyone pretends this is normal. So I think the Trump thing, without evidence of something deeper, is just a bizarre thing that if you explained it to us, the versions of us that existed a couple of years ago, we would say it's impossible that such a thing would happen, that you'd have an assassination and no one would really look into it. And people would, like the FBI head, would just randomly make up perjurious statements about, trying to diminish the effect of claiming that there was not a bullet, but shrapnel. Just these things are basically impossible to believe. In the same way that if you described the current Democratic electoral strategy, it would have been impossible to believe. But that's just where we are. So, welcome to the future.
One of the things that I've noticed that kind of like gives me pause is I don't feel like the conservative media out there took full advantage of the situation that they had in their hands with the Trump attempted assassination, and they allowed um, the Kamala Harris becoming the nominee in the Democratic Party to steal the headlines.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think
So it was like you got like 2 days of, oh, everybody loves Trump. And like the way, and I explained this to somebody the other day. I was like, the way I look at it is he he earned like man points with me. Like he gained respect, you know, from me with that. Because I never really respected Trump. I always thought he was kind of a clown and just kind of
absolutely.
goofy. But I'm a clown and I'm goofy. So it's not really a bad thing, you
Hopefully,
know?
no one's taken a shot at you lately.
Yeah, I don't plan on getting shot anytime soon. But it's like that was just kind of the way I looked at him. I just never really took him seriously, kind of the way I don't really take myself seriously. I just kind of like, all right, yeah, he's funny. I enjoy the entertainment value of what he brings to the table, and it's better than any other politician because at least I get a laugh out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And but he did earn some respect, from me in showing that, I mean, for lack of a better term, he's got balls, he stood
Yeah,
up,
absolutely.
so, but it's kind of like they let that moment slip through their fingertips. They didn't hold on and keep it in the headlines as long as they could have, and they allowed the Democrat Party to kind of steer the headlines and hijack those headlines with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the underlying premise is that the right wing has any ability whatsoever to set what the news is. I mean, this has been true my whole life that the problem isn't nowadays. The problem is that the left wing media, which is the same thing, lie overtly and continuously. But for much longer, they've had both the willingness and the ability to set what the news is. And the right wing simply doesn't have the ability to do that. It just doesn't. Like even if Fox News wasn't basically not that different from the left wing media, Fox News can't set what the news is. The fact is that and this is what Michael Anton calls the narrative. The narrative is set by the left because they have infinite resources and infinite abilities to broadcast those resources. So unless you're on X or some other platform where the narrative is the control is not complete, they can simply talk about what it is they want to talk about and make sure everyone else is also talking about that. Or by the same token, make people not talk about something, make something disappear from the headlines. And I mean, this is people have done very deep dives like Cryptos on Twitter into the various forms of modern propaganda and the philosophical analysis behind this. And I find those things interesting. They're a bit egg-headed for my tastes because I'm more of a practical guy. But the fact is that they are able, through the modern techniques of propaganda, to dictate to us what it is we talk about. That is, we react not because we're reactive people who should know better, but because we dance to their tune because that's the way the system is set up. Because if otherwise, we're not talking about anything. We only yes, to some extent we are. You and I are having this conversation, but like this conversation, it will impact the listeners, but it doesn't set what the news is. And so it's not a question of the right wing dropping the ball. We couldn't, no matter how hard the right wing tried, this would have been the inevitable because that was their intention. It was obviously very dangerous to them to have this our narrative become a competing narrative. And you saw this not so much with the assassination, but with that brief period where they were pushing Biden out. They didn't, and which was also, you saw some of this during the assassination attempt. The media didn't know what to say, so they were saying things that were different media outlets were saying things that were conflicting with each other, something I'd never seen in my entire life before, because they hadn't received their instructions, their download, not from some central place, but from the kind of emergent property of people who decide these things. And so you saw, for example, the initial reaction of everybody when it seemed like a legitimate possibility that Biden would be pushed out was, this is a disaster because there's no possible way we can put Kamala Harris in instead of Biden because she's dumber than a box of rocks and everybody hates her. So what do we do? And then they got over that and pretended that whole discussion had never happened. The right wing simply can't do anything like that. And so here we are now dancing to their tune, talking about, is Kamala Harris qualified to, but we're doing that because they set up the framework that we play within.
I mean, I try not to have that conversation because to me it's obvious that Kamala Harris is not qualified to do anything. And it's just like, okay. But I'm seeing what you're saying and I'm watching it and I'm going, are these people stupid? Like, like how far down the idiocracy like pipeline have we slid? It feels to me like, and maybe I'm kind of romanticizing the past, but it feels to me that when Rush Limbaugh was around, he had an ability to control the conversation much more than anybody on the conservative side today has an ability to control the conversation. And
True.
that wasn't always good because I didn't always agree with Rush Limbaugh, but at least I found him funny, entertaining, and he had this kind of like this charisma, this quality about him that he was able to kind of steer headlines.
Yes, and there are fewer kind of other outlets. Obviously, the big outlet now is X, and that was you saw the unhinged fury of the media when it appeared, and this will continue no doubt, that X was allowing cracks to appear in the media's setting of the narrative through the direct discussions with Trump. But I think that we have reached the idiocracy point. But only part of it is idiocracy. I think if you look at like the Democratic Party, that it's no longer about, and it was even much more so in Rush Limbaugh's day when people like James Carville were running things. It was a much more masculine environment where you had to prove things to other people and discuss things. the Democratic Party is hyper feminized now, like much of our society. And so it's all about the feelings and the emotions and the validations. And, Kamala Harris dancing because dancing makes me feel good. You don't actually have to have an argument or demonstrate anything. In fact, arguing is toxic masculinity, having any kind of disagreement. We just need to all, get in line. And behind that, of course, there's people who are men who are actually angling for power, who are kind of riding this wave of things. But it actually makes a lot of sense that they're running this Harris type campaign because we've allowed America to become feminized, and so and at the same time we've allowed America to be hyper democratized, and the result of that is idiocracy. Not because everyone's stupid, though people are getting more stupid, but because people act as if they're stupid because they're looking at the world through feminine eyes.
I was I was thinking I wrote that on X a while back that so Kamala Harris had that first big rally where Megan the Stallion
Yeah.
was singing and she was twerking, and then like my first thought was like, so if Trump just had Kid Rock twerk, like y'all would vote for him? Like I'm just like it just doesn't make any sense.
It's really, I mean, you can see why people like James Carville, I don't know, are upset. I don't know if you've read some of his interviews, but he's
Mhm.
running around overtly complaining that I mean, he sounds like us, except that his focus is on getting actual power for the left. But he's like, this is stupid. Young men don't want to vote for this because it's saying you can't play football and that you shouldn't drink and that you need to have more safety. And he overtly complains about these things but that's where we are. I mean, I, I don't know what to say about it, except it's just everything every day it seems stupider, and you just wonder how stupid it can get.
It seems like they hedge their bets in the idea that there are enough women that vote and enough beta males that are willing to vote however these women tell them to vote so they can
Yes,
get a piece of ass that they think they're going to win just based on that.
absolutely. I
Right.
mean, what's the numbers? Like 70% of unmarried women, or 70+% vote Democratic, and I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
probably like another 30% probably don't vote Republican. They probably vote like RFK or some fringe party or
Libertarian or something. Yeah.
unmarried women shouldn't be allowed to vote, period. I mean, unmarried men probably shouldn't be. But the fact is that the vote, I mean, I don't like, you can imagine all sorts of ways in which you should restructure democracy to restrict the franchise to people who have a stake in society. And that's not obviously not practical in any meaningful sense, but as a philosophical matter, unmarried women don't have any stake in society. Unmarried men can have a slightly greater stake in society, but until you commit to marriage and to the possibility of having children, you simply don't have as great a stake in society as somebody else does. That said, it's not in fact historically true that women vote left. In fact, quite the opposite is true. One of the major arguments against women's suffrage early on was that women tended to vote for right-wing parties, so left-wing parties didn't like it. And famously, the bulwark of National Socialist support in Germany was German housewives, who voted like 99% for the National Socialist Democratic Workers' Party. And of course, there were no unmarried women in any relevant quantities back then, so
Right.
that problem was a different one. But it wasn't like their husbands were telling these women to vote right wing. In fact, they were probably telling their husbands to vote right wing. So there's no reason to say that in general women, for this reason, there's no particular reason to restrict the franchise vis-a-vis women. I'm just saying, as a practical matter, nowadays, unmarried women are toxin upon the land in terms of their voting habits.
So do you think this the whole like weird talking point that the left has kind of come up with to describe Trump and JD Vance, do you think that carries some weight? Because to me it sounds like grade school crap, that you'd hear on the playground. Like you're a poopy head butt face and you're stupid, and it's like,
Well,
okay, yeah,
no idea. Though, as a sidebar, I'll come back to the effect. I have noticed my children report that the use of gay as an insult has returned to the youth. which I regard as a
Well,
hugely
that's good.
positive thing. Yes. So,
Yes.
maybe the people aren't as stupid as we think, or at least the children aren't as stupid as we think. But I have no idea. Like
Well,
I, don't-
I say it's good for my own benefit because I've always said that. I've never stopped. And
no, me
I
too.
was worried at times that I'd be locked up for for my use of the
No,
word
and
gay.
I've redoubled my use of it, of course, because I want to be, as I always tell my children, I want to be down with the youth of today. And so, anyway, so that apparently means using the word gay as a slur, and so I intend to use it 800 times a day. In any case, it's I actually do regard that as a highly positive sign. I can't tell you, like, I'm not the median voter, right? I don't like. It's funny. I listened to that Twitter space with Musk and Trump, or part of it, because it was pretty long and I went to bed.
Yeah. Yeah, I went
It's
to bed too.
and I've read Musk's autobiography of Musk. I've written a lot about Musk. I've literally never heard him speak before, ever. I've never heard his voice before that time. So I was like, oh shit, his voice is very, very interesting. I mean, I just don't watch any video. Like I would just refuse on principle to watch. I watched the video of the Trump shooting, but that's about it. I mean, and I watch like YouTube videos. I listen to stuff. I consume some podcasts that way, and I watch like YouTube videos on how to repair my toilet. So it's not like I watch no video, and I occasionally watch tips or what have you. But like I don't consume news in video format, and so
Right.
I can't tell you what. So I'm not the median voter. I would like to think that most people aren't stupid enough to be swayed by those things, and that does come up against the limits of the media's ability to set the narrative. That you can try to set a narrative all day long, but if your narrative, like some narratives, simply lost to you, trying to set the narrative, say Trump is a coward, just is impossible now, right? Back to what you were saying. So there's some narratives you simply can't convey, can't impose, or that fail. And maybe this, but I saw some references to this weird thing. I didn't pay any attention. I mean, I'm a huge Vance fan, so I just don't care. Like this is tied to my general opinion about politics, which has been true for a couple of years, which is that it doesn't really matter that we're an idiocracy because all this is shadow play. I mean, shadow play in the run up to whatever is going to come next. It doesn't really matter what happens at some level. So, for example, I maintain that Trump is going to win because Trump is going to win. I don't have like a big chart. I don't do polling. Trump's going to win because Trump's going to win, and that's what I say. And at that point, the shadow play will probably come to an end, and it will have real world impacts. And no one will be talking anymore about people being weird. We'll be talking about more, substantial things. But even if it doesn't happen this time, eventually we'll have to talk about more substantial things. So when the Chinese defeat us in some war, or we have some economic catastrophe, people will no longer have the luxury of being stupid because being stupid will lead to very bad things for a lot of people. So
Hmm.
we're all going to smarten up real fast.
My so it felt like to me like what happened was there was the attempted assassination on Trump, and the media recalculated, and they're like, we can't continue calling him a fascist
Mm-hmm.
because we're obviously stoking these flames that are creating this environment for people to try attempt to assassinate him. And it's making him look good when he survives these assassination attempts.
Yeah.
And so we have to do something different. And Tim Waltz came up with this idea of saying, well, this whole cat lady thing is just weird. And it's like, it's actually not that weird. Like I
Oh, weird.
remember like, well, here in rural America, crazy cat ladies are a thing. Like maybe these people, like these city folk, don't understand this, but it wasn't 15 years ago. I was sitting talking to my mom, and she had 20 barn cats, and she had 8 cats living inside. And she's like, "When your dad dies, you know I'm going to be the crazy cat lady." Like it was like just basic vernacular for rural America. So it's like listening to these people kind of like paint this whole thing with this brush like it's some oddity, and nobody's ever heard anybody say something like this before. It's like, what are y'all talking about? This is like the way we talk.
Well, I think they're offended. I think they take cat lady in a slightly different way, and I think they think of the cat lady as the urban professional woman. It's like why not? where the urban professional woman who has a cat as a substitute for the things she should be doing in her life, which is getting a husband and children and focusing on them rather than becoming, as Tucker Carlson once sarcastically said, aiming to become vice president of international bonds or some shit. So, I mean, so I mean that's what, and they're very offended by that because the desire they desire women not to have those commitments, but rather to be wholly devoted to the leftist project. At the same time, they regard this emancipation of women from the supposed shackles of marriage and child rearing as one of their most important accomplishments and continued goals. So to them, it's they find the phrase insulting, not because they think of like the crazy cat lady with 20 cats, but because they think of the aging formerly young professional who has hit the wall now. No one swipes right, and so they get a couple of cats, and then they volunteer for Kamala Harris because she promised us that they can dance or something.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to talk to you about JD Vance because the it it so the narrative I saw that came out was after the attempted assassination, there was a narrative that popped up that basically said that Trump had taken a major right turn. He had shifted his complete strategy based upon the attempted assassination attempt, and that he had changed his idea of who was going to be his vice president. I had been hearing up to that point that it was going to be Marco Rubio, but I kind of always kind of, yeah, exactly. But I kept hearing Megyn Kelly kept talking about JD Vance, and she was making these kind of like insinuations that she knew something. And then when he picked JD Vance, I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I and the reason I think it makes sense is because JD Vance to me seems like more of an insurance policy than anything. Like JD Vance is a true believer. And
Mhm.
if Trump becomes president and they kill him, then they really got hell on their hands dealing with JD Vance pushing this populist agenda.
Right. Or even if Trump just drops dead. I mean, he's not young, obviously. I mean,
Oh man, could have fooled
uh,
me.
I think
The dude's got more energy than I
is what.
do. Trump, he has more energy than I do.
Well, the thing with Vance is it demonstrates to a certain extent how the media feels completely free to lie. That is, in the past, they try to guide the narrative, and now they try to create narratives by simply manufacturing facts. So, for example, for a while there, they were lying, saying Trump is considering dumping JD Vance because that's what they wanted. So they figured if they could make a bunch of lies and maybe it would catch fire. So it really is. I mean, I make this point all the time, but I mean, I lived through and was directly exposed to and indirectly through my father, who taught Russian history, late communist uh, media. In Hungary, where I spent some time, my father spent a bunch of time in late Soviet Russia. I mean, they had nothing on us in terms of the lies and propaganda that the media puts out. In terms of the yes, they both late Soviet media and our media lie kind of equally in the sense that they just make up stuff, but far more people believe it here out of a combination of ideological servitude to the left, and the propaganda is much slicker, and that makes functionally things like X serve as the voice of America. But it reaches or convinces a much smaller section of people than it did in late Soviet times. But there's no difference in terms of the truth quantity. There is a difference. I mean, our media now contains less truth than, say, late Soviet TASS or Izvestia or Pravda, these news organs of the late Soviet state. And you saw that with Vance. I'm sure we're going to continue to see that with Vance because I think you're correct. You identify that Vance is a real threat to the left. And there's really no solution for that except for Trump not to win. And since, as I say, Trump is going to win, that's a real problem for them.
So you said you really like Vance. What is it that you've seen? Because somebody asked me about him a while back, and the only way I could like think to describe him, I was like, he's like a white Vivek. Like he's just
That's actually not a bad analogy. I mean, obviously, their backgrounds are different. I mean, I don't know JD Vance personally. I do know a lot of people who know him personally, so there's an element of personal vouching, as it were.
mm,
Uh, but like Vivek, he says a lot of things that are coded right wing in the sense that only you and I recognize those things as pointers to the right wing. I mean, the most
mm.
famous example of that is the people he follows on X, which include me. I don't get mentioned, but because I'm not as high profile as a Bronze Age pervert, whom he also, but he only follows like 1,000 people, and among that is a significant handful of very edgy right wing accounts. I mean, again, speaking of unbelievable things, this is a good unbelievable thing. If you had described even a few years ago, that someone who is the vice presidential candidate for the Republican Party and entirely possibly a future president follows and refuses to in any way disavow these Bronze Age pervert. I mean, you would have said that's crazy. I mean, this is no way. No politician could like be seen as having any interest in Bronze Age pervert. He has to immediately write a long screed saying how racism is bad and how Bronze Age pervert is a bodybuilder racist. And JD Vance is like, whatever, shut up. And so I think the it's not so much that I think JD Vance has any particular policy position that I'm like, that sounds great, JD. Your point number 8, that's really something that we need to stand behind. That's not what I'm talking about or what I see. We see someone who isn't afraid to engage with real ideas that matter for the future of the country, and is, even more importantly, is completely unwilling to apologize for them. I wrote a piece long ago about this, but preemptive apologies are the besetting sin and have been for a long time of the right. And Vance simply won't apologize. And the best example, back to cat ladies, I'm sure you saw this, is that when they kept pressing him about the cat ladies, he finally said, I'm going to apologize to the cats.
Yeah.
And that's just a big middle. And the media, the media complex, the left media complex, just doesn't know what to do with this, because from so many years they have been used to be able to say the magic words to any person right of center and immediately have that person fall over themselves to jump through whatever hoops they dictate. I mean, the classic example, of course, is racism. Prove you're not a racist, and then you have to do all these things. Like no one ever asks me if I'm a racist, but if they did, I'd be like, I don't care, shut up. Yeah, I don't care if
Mm.
I'm whatever. Just that's an irrelevant question. That's asking me if I like to I don't know. I can't think of a good analogy. But I mean, so he's a major politician who takes that same approach. I'm just not talking about that because you're stupid and you're ugly. Now shut up. And they just don't know what to do with that.
I One of the things about Vance that has struck me is he he's living the ultimate American dream, right? Coming from the background that he's come from,
Yeah.
and basically, I mean, and finding himself in taking advantage of opportunities when they present themselves to him, and creating, I don't know if he's a billionaire, multimillionaire, whatever, but creating this type of life for him. This is what every kid growing up in poverty dreams of. It was like, I'll get these opportunities and I got to make sure I kick that door in when these opportunities present themselves. And he actually was able to do it, you know. And it's something like, I mean, I grew up, I wasn't wealthy or anything when growing up. I'm still not wealthy, but I'm doing, pretty decent. And it's like, okay. And it feels good when you get out of that situation and you're not eating ramen noodles every night. It's like, and so I see that and I'm like, there's something, and they downplay it, and I think that's what the whole Tim Waltz pick was about, was an ability, like an attempt to downplay JD Vance, right? And what he's accomplished, and what is he, 39? He's not even 40 yet,
No, he's
right?
super young. I don't know how. I mean, I'm sure he'll have financial disclosures, and I am curious. I don't think he's a billionaire, but my guess is he's worth 10 million or 20 million. I mean, which is good money, but not Bill Gates money. I mean,
Right, right,
not
right, right,
knocking
right.
10 million, but he's not like super rich, like he can like buy Twitter or whatever himself. but you're right. I think that, since I don't pay that much attention to the campaign, I'm not sure if they've been putting that front and center. That his Horatio Alger kind of story. I do think that from what I can see, which hasn't been maybe a misapprehension because, as I said, I don't look at the campaign. They're spending too much time on these things that are sideshows. I mean, yes, they should attack Waltz for his stolen valor and so on, but you're better off doing that, having surrogates do that, and then just talking all the time about how great JD Vance is, along the lines you were just talking about, and how great Trump is. The negative attacks are funny, but the problem is that since the right can't set the narrative, it's impossible to set a narrative that fits with what the Trump campaign wants to be the narrative, no matter how hard they try to repeat it. And so the important thing is simply to appeal to the voters. And this is, I think, the biggest single flaw of the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign needs to appeal directly and explicitly to white men. And they just refuse to do that. And because white men have relatively low turnout, white men are the most persecuted class in America today, and they want Trump to win. And that doesn't mean that Trump has to like run around saying white, white, white. I mean, we have to, but you can say things that appeal to white men very easily. I mean, that's what consultants are for, to come up with campaigns that make sense along those lines. So Trump and Vance both need to explicitly and vociferously appeal to white men and make no apologies for that and make no bones about it. So if we see that, then we'll know we're making progress.
I think I think part of the problem with putting JD Vance front and center of the campaign is Trump. I think he has an issue with putting somebody in front of him. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying? And
Absolutely.
so mostly what I hear about JD Vance's background comes from like mainstream media, and they're trying to downplay it. Oh, you're not really working class. You went to Yale and got a legal degree. And I'm like, yeah, but his parents were crackheads and he
Yeah.
worked his way up to that point, but they skip over that. They're like, yeah, this rich guy that went to Yale and got a law degree and then went to work for Peter Thiel. He wants to convince you he's working class, and they skip over, all the
Right.
other
I mean,
things he did.
they're lying liars who lie. I can't remember where that
Yeah.
phrase comes from, but but you're totally right. Like Trump doesn't want to be upstage, but he doesn't need to be upstage. That is, he can set the campaign things, and I think he's heading in the right direction with his attacks on immigration. I mean, he needs to attack all immigration, not just illegal immigration. But in an election campaign, illegal immigration is an easier hit. The problem, of course, is that illegal immigration should include all asylum seekers who are all fake. And so the problem is that when you say illegal immigration, you incorrectly, technically are referring only to people who literally cross the border without informing anyone. Whereas the big
Hmm.
problem is people showing up in the border and saying that they want asylum and then just disappearing into the country. I mean, the answer
Right.
is, I mean, obviously, wire at every border and machine guns. I mean, then no people will cross the border illegally anymore, and then there's deny. I mean, anyone who asks for asylum is given a punch in the face and a boot in the butt, 180 degrees back from where they came from, and then nobody will come and ask for asylum. So if he can be aggressive about this, perhaps not as aggressive as I just outlined. That's probably not an overly politically palatable position. It is, but I mean, it's the correct position. And so, what you want is a president who will have a moderate position, relatively moderate, meaning all illegal immigrants should be deported on day one. 10 million, 20 million, whatever, by force. That's a moderate position. And the real position is no immigration should be allowed except for carefully vetted people with special skills and hot chicks. I mean, that's the correct immigration platform, or not platform policy. We're probably not going to get that, but in the abstract. So my point is that, if I have a point here, is that JD Vance doesn't have to take away Trump's thunder. He can take the message that Trump sets, which will hopefully revolve around these things that are important to actual Americans and heritage Americans, real Americans, and execute that without taking away from Trump's limelight. which he loves so much.
There was I don't know if you watch comedy any. So
Not really.
there's a show called Kill Tony that comes on every Monday.
Okay.
A few weeks ago, they had Shane Gillis and Adam Ray on there, and Shane Gillis was dressed up as Donald Trump, and Adam Ray was dressed up as Joe Biden.
I
And
don't know who they are. Am I supposed to
they're
tell?
they're stand-up comedians.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, yeah. And so and I think it was Adam Ray asked no, it was another stand-up comedian, David Lucas, asked Shane Gillis, who's doing the part of Donald Trump,
Uh-huh.
and says, what are black jobs? And he's like, you said immigrants are taking black jobs. What are black jobs? And Shane Gillis goes, immigrants are being loud on buses. And it was, like it was just so funny because it was out of the blue. But
I mean, it is weird that I think now I've heard for my entire life that this is the election that black people will vote Republican. So I don't think that black people are going to vote Republican. But it is weird that the kind of think there's more unity among black and white people who are kind of reality based, who may have historical differences, but at least they can be agree that the kind of immigration we're getting is bad for both black people and white people, and they all need to go back, and then the black people and white people can work out their differences together, and not in a George Floyd kind of way, but in a more appropriate kind of way. Weirdly, immigration is kind of a black and white uniting thing on the right, at least, or among people who are on the left. It's not because of all the obvious reasons, but I think that people have a uh, see that is a potential issue to unite Americans, at least for the time being.
I think there is a movement. And I don't know how big it is. I know there's estimation that Trump is looking at possibly getting around 18% of the black vote, and most of those are black males that are kind of tired of the the fingers pointed at them as if they're like an issue by
Well, black
black
men are tired of
females.
being right. Black men are tired of being longhoused. I mean, masculinity has always been something that has been important in the black community, and they're completely longhoused. And
Right.
I mean, I'd be tired of it too if I was a black man. I'm tired of it as a white man.
Well, but I look and I see like there's like Candace Owens who's really pretty popular, and then there's this the Hodge twins, those guys, and then there's this Carter family, and I'm watching and I'm like, wow, like they're like these these black influencers that are a whole having like these political conversations from a right wing perspective, and it's very interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very positive thing. I'm not sure that the blacks are going to vote significantly for Donald Trump. But the fact is, America is always going to be a society with black people and white people. And you
Mhm.
occasionally get these psychos who think we're going to have a white ethnicity or something. America is always going to be a multiracial society. And that
Yeah,
means black people and white people and a certain amount of Hispanics, hopefully soon to be sharply reduced by, mass deportations of people who have arrived here over the past 40 years. But I mean, there's plenty of Hispanic people who have been here for hundreds of years. It's a
right.
multiracial society. I mean, and that means we have to manage the multiracial component. And I mean, this just seems so obvious, but the reason we can't manage it is because for decades the left has used black people and manipulated them in order to make it to feed their using the left demand for emancipation, feed the black feeling of that they are the target of white racism. When that has never been the case in any significant degree. I mean, it's just a myth. And the real problem is racism against white people, at least now it is. And how to kind of bring it back to understanding that racism basically doesn't exist in any meaningful level except against white people and doesn't have to exist. That's a real tough nut to crack. I'm not sure how you could do that on a societal level.
Yeah, it well, it's It's so
Everyone's racist.
strange.
Sorry, let me complete the thought. I mean, everyone's racist at some level, right? Because people tell like racist jokes and so on. But the idea of like structural racism, where like all these white people are just like hating on black people, is just kind of obviously silly and has been, has not didn't exist to the degree that people tell us it used to, 70 years ago, and hasn't existed among white people for many decades. Sorry,
No, you're fine because I always have an issue with these race conversations because I mean I'm a child of the 90s. Like it was there was no racism. It was just kind of
right.
like yeah, we busted each other's balls. I remember going on a job one time we were painting at I think we were working at DuPont, the DuPont plant here in Orange, and we were painting some tanks and we had this big ass black dude that worked with us. He was probably like 6'5". He's just this big ass dude. He was funny as hell. And you know, the paint suits, it's like this paper suit, right? And you wear this like little white mask and then you wear your respirator over that and goggles over that. And so he come walking around and he had pulled his paint mask up into a point and he come walking around. Well, if you can't beat him, join him. You know, like, and yeah, we just
That's funny.
busted each other's balls. It was funny. It was just we were goofing off. We were talking shit about being racist because we were all working together. We're all making about the same amount of money. We were just looking to go home and take care of our family. We weren't like worried about whose race was what. And so it really feels like this whole racist kind of agenda that they spew out there is a problem within the oligarchy. And it's not a problem within working class.
I mean, whipping up of hatreds of people who are in your kind of political coalition against people outside your political coalition has a tactic as old as time. It's been so destructive of American society because I remember the 90s too. And yeah, I mean, there's always some level of interpersonal racism that's real. Like there are people out there who are like, I just don't like black people, and there's plenty of people who I just don't like white people. I just think they're bad. I just think that. I mean, those people are always going to exist, but that's
Mm,
not a major societal problem. There's no reason to like upend society on that basis. You just basically don't associate with those people if you don't, and if you don't like that, not just because they're hating on you, but maybe you don't like people who behave and they have bad manners. You tell your children not to associate with people with bad
right.
manners.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the entire legal. I mean, basically, huge segments of American society are based around legal transfers of stuff from white people to non-white people using racism as the excuse. I mean, Jeremy Carl's book, The Unprotected Class, which came out, goes over this in detail. But I mean, everyone's known this for a long time. I mean, basically, a white person is there to be extracted from because he's racist, and everyone else is there to be given by the white person. And that's obviously no way you can set up a society for long-term happiness.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's insane. And when you put it that way, it becomes crystal clear what we're looking at. And it's just insanity to me that and maybe I'm just like noticing this absurdity and it just makes me laugh, but it's like all these old white people in DC want to tell, you know, all of us out in society how racist we are, and we're looking at them like, what makes you think we give a shit? You know, it's like,
Yeah, but the fact is that a lot of us, if you work in any sizable company, and even in many unsizable companies, you have to care because if you're accused of racism by anybody, you're instantly fired. You know, this happens all the time, and you're constantly being passed over and basically in one way or another being disadvantaged because you're white. And so the fact is that those people, those old white people in DC, have an enormous impact upon the rest of society, an enormously
hmm,
pernicious impact upon the rest of society. And you and I kind of have the luxury of well, they could call us racist, whatever. That's just another stupid thing they're doing there in DC. But most people, for example, I was having dinner. My wife and I were having dinner a couple of weeks ago with some people from church that we know, and the wife works in a large corporation, and she's terrified all day, every day of saying the wrong thing, because that she'll be instantly fired if she were to say the wrong thing, or she were to suggest that she doesn't think Pride Month is awesome. Instantly fired. And that's so people who say like the woke is being put away are so unbelievably stupid. I mean, the woke is not being put away in any way, shape, or form, either superficially or substantively. These kind of problems continue to exist just because Pride Month, Pervert Month was a little bit less spectacular this year doesn't mean that the iron grip that those perverts have on the throat of America has loosened even a little bit. In fact, it's choking the life out of America even more.
Mm.
Wow, I'm getting all worked up tonight.
Well, that's all right. So when you look at what happened with like with Bud Light and with Target in 2023, and I kind of feel like that took an effect on the Pride Month of 2024. Do you think that's just like a blip in the radar, and in 2025 it'll be full steam ahead once again, especially if
um,
Trump wins? I
Look, I have
think.
no idea what's happened in 2025, so I can't say. I mean, a lot depends on other things, but the fact is that and there have been a couple kind of wins with Tractor Supply and John Deere backing down a little bit publicly from their pushing anti-white hatred and so on, and pushing perverts. But I think that the the Pride Month thing is a little bit of a misdirection, in the sense that whether or not there's bigger or more grandiose or more sparkly parades is irrelevant, because at every entity in America, the homosexuals oppress everybody else. And that their word is law. What they want goes. Anybody who opposes them is instantly punished. So that hasn't changed at all. Like but if you work for whatever InBev or whatever, who owns Anheuser-Busch, and
Mm,
you don't put on that pride pin today, you'll be fired just as quick as if you would have been fired 2 years ago. There's
mm,
been no let up in their reign of terror inside these companies. So just because the pride parades may not be quite as pushed in ordinary people's faces, they're pushing it in ordinary people's faces in their places of employment and the other places where they have power. And of course, they're continuing to groom children in schools and all the things that they've done for decades under the cover of gay rights. And so the none of that has changed at all, and
mm,
no one was fired at Anheuser-Busch or InBev, whoever, hasn't apologized, hasn't done anything at all to suggest that because they know they can't. They know that anybody who even suggests that anything but 100% compliance with the homosexual agenda's line will be permanently destroyed. So Pride Month may be a little bit less visible for one reason or another. And part of that relates, of course, to the internal warfare on the left because of the current wars of the Israelis. That's obviously something that's affected some of the internal left dynamics. But
mm.
the power of the homosexual agenda hasn't been reduced any at all.
Yeah, I mean, we see it like it's a lot more global. I think it's a lot more saturated than we think, and I think that's why you saw like what we saw with the Olympics intro into the Olympics, making fun of
Mhm.
the Last Supper, and and then people tried to sell it. Well, that's not what they were doing, and it's like no, they came out and said that's what they were doing. Like it's pretty obvious what was going on here.
It wasn't obvious. I mean, they stated it. I mean, Jonathan Peugeot, as you probably saw, did a short video
Mm,
about it.
yeah.
But that's a good example back to the stuff we were talking about earlier about lying. Like they feel free just to say things that are overt falsehoods, demonstrable falsehoods, and to spread this all over through their media channels because they see that this was a mistake and that it could have political ramifications for them. They just lie, and then they repeat the lie. I mean, this is a grossly overused analogy. I mean, this is the supposed, though it's not strictly true, what Joseph Goebbels said about the big lie, that you repeat something. I hate using that because it's such a cliched thing, but it is an element of truth in that. They can just repeat these total lies, and otherwise intelligent people will then turn around and repeat these lies as if they're gospel truth. I mean, I
Hmm.
saw this on Facebook. I still have a Facebook account, though I only kind of lurk there. And I see people that I'm friends with, like who are smart people. I went to my law school, and they just repeat these things because they're, not because they're stupid. They're clearly not stupid, but because they live in this ideological worldview where they got a download, and the download said this had nothing to do with the Last Supper, and despite all the self admission of the organizers that to the exact opposite, they just repeat these things. So um, until there's no, but that's also a good example. They felt free to do that even after, and I don't know what happens in Europe in this context, but there's certainly no global pushback against Pervert Month. I mean, they feel free to do all these things, and until there's pushback, then this thing will continue. That's just kind of the way it works.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing my part. I went and bought a shirt that has that scene, that World War II scene where the guy grabbed the chick and kissed her, and there's that picture from that iconic picture. Um,
You
of
broke up for a bit. You broke out, but
oh,
you
I
bought
was
what?
saying I was saying I'm doing my part. I got a shirt. You know that iconic World War II photo where the soldier grabs that woman and kisses her.
Sure.
Okay. So Sean Strickland, a UFC fighter, had made a shirt and it's got an American flag and it has that picture in the middle of it and it says American Pride Month. So I wear that every June.
Oh,
So
I should definitely get a cop and get a shirt like that.
yeah,
It's
I'll see if I can't find
I'll look.
if
Oh,
if the link's still active, I'll send it to you.
okay, yeah, please do.
Yeah. So I do wear that as often as possible just to make sure like it's like, yeah, like we're gonna push pride in this direction and not keep
I'm
it.
a big. I don't tend to wear a lot of political shirts, but I do have a shirt that I had made. It's like those in this neighborhood yard signs that left wing people have. That
Mm.
in this neighborhood we believe in it, and it says it's. I'm a big Carl Schmidt fan, and so it says in this neighborhood we decide the state of exception and who is friend, who is enemy. And I wear that to Costco sometimes. It's a play on some Carl Schmidt stuff. So
I like the yard signs where it's like, yeah, my neighbor doesn't believe in the Second Amendment, so rob him, or something like that. It's like,
sound advice.
yeah, yeah.
I'm not
It's
sure it's
like,
conducive to good neighborly relations, but
but what do you what do you have any kind of a general thoughts on how this election cycle is going to play out? I know you said you're not paying super close attention to what's going on with the campaigns, but do you have any general thoughts? Because it seems like what's happening right now is Kamala Harris is doing a really good job of avoiding media because she can't just speak randomly. She can't just have a conversation with somebody without space is important because it's space and it's around and you're like, all right, lady, there's something extremely condescending about that the tone that left women especially kind of take when they're trying to explain something, and it's like they don't just talk to us. It's like this, I don't even know what to call it, but it's just this kind of weird, kind of preachy, like we're kindergartners or something. It's just real
I mean,
strange kind of thing.
it's a distorted feminism or feminization. That is the women try to enforce social conformity. And the cure for that is not allowing women to enforce social conformity, but instead insisting that the public sphere be dominated by men who approach things with a direct competitive and argumentative basis. But when you let women run all the public sectors of society, what you get is an attempt to force conformity through things like lectures. I don't know if you saw this, was circulating a while ago on TikTok. Not that I'm on TikTok, but there's apparently some woman who's hugely popular with videos of how, as a kindergarten teacher, she would talk to Donald Trump. And so, this is a way to enforce social conformity without actually having arguments or rationality, but rather through shaming and attempts at forced empathy and all the various things that are kind of a hyper feminized version of society. Whereas, obviously, a society that works well balances those things. We have a hyper feminized society where the feminine has been allowed to dominate our public discourse, particularly on the left, not so much on the right. But yeah, I mean, I have a very specific set of predictions actually about the election cycle, even though I don't pay any attention to it, which of course
Mm,
may make my predictions stupid. But I actually I wrote a whole article for Man's World, Raw Egg Nationalist magazine, which is going to be
mm.
published at the end of October about my predictions. So we'll see if they're all falsified by then. But my short version of my prediction is that Trump will win because Trump is going to win. There will be massive violence as a result, dwarfing the Floyd riots, but only in left-controlled areas. That violence will have no impact upon Trump, no meaningful impact upon Trump. And sometime between November and January, there will be an actual old-fashioned coup attempt to prevent tanks in the streets type coup attempt to prevent Trump from taking office because there's just too many people who, whether they're right or not, think that Trump being actually in office, it will destroy their project of building global homo, the global American empire, all around the world. And so they simply will not allow Trump to take office without attempting to stop him from taking office by force. I mean, that's a stupid move because I don't think Trump would actually do that much useful if he was governing, but it's a clarifying move, certainly, if it happens.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like I'm kind of with you there. I don't I don't know if I see necessarily see Trump doing anything particularly useful if he wins the presidency, but I think there's a statement that's made and it kind of like it, it sets a tone for the next administration. And I think that's what we're looking for right now.
I just don't. I think on a historical basis, I, it's definitely true without immediately resorting to violence. And they perceive wise they this here, and so that if he wins, that necessarily means that they're losing power. But they'll resort to violence to prevent Trump from governing, even though he would not, in fact, govern in any way. He's not immigration, for example. He's going to continue instead of following the Haywood program, which I outlined earlier for immigration. He's going to do something that's not very different from what he did last time. But the reason I can't make predictions into 2025 is because if I'm right, all bets are going to be off. I mean, once people start actual coup attempts, then you're kind of in uncharted territory.
Well, I mean, the good news is the Olympics have tried to make domestic violence great again. So, worst come to worst, you can just put on a skirt and beat a woman.
Yeah, I think my prediction is that will become, or at least my hope, both my prediction and my hope is things like that will not be permitted in the near future and never again. And everyone
Yeah,
involved in that will be hunted down and punished severely.
I think
Um,
you're right. I'm
so
just
now is
messing
the time.
around.
So
Yeah, I'm just joking. I'm messing around. I have dark humor sometimes. So yeah, no, I think you're absolutely correct. I think that people that saw. I mean, there was a year, probably about 5 years ago, and this is why Joe Rogan spoke out on the trans issue and about trans women like competing in men's sports because there was Fallon Fox was a biological male MMA fighter that entered the UFC as a woman and literally broke this chick's face in a fight. It was like one of the most uncomfortable. I love UFC, and it was one of the most uncomfortable things I'd ever seen.
yeah,
It was, and and then when it came out, like, oh yeah, well, this is a biological male that had gone through puberty and had all the testosterone of a male, et cetera, and you're like, oh, that's why it looked so terrible to watch as her fists were sinking into this chick's face. It's like this
I mean,
dude was just beating the hell out of a woman.
Right. I mean, these things have a simple answer, which is if you have the correct chromosomes, then you're a man, you're a woman. And if you have some weird incorrect chromosomes, then you're just not allowed. You're not allowed to compete in anything. You're just a special case. That's it. Too bad. I mean, these things have very simple solutions. The problem is that no one will execute those simple solutions.
And the real problem is there's such this kind of like this liberal mindset that even like you hear the conservatives talk about it and they get all outraged about it and they're like, well, you should have a men's division, a women's division, and an open division. And so therefore anybody who's competing in the open division knows that they could be competing with a man or a woman. I'm like, no, don't do that.
Well, I mean, I got in trouble saying this on Twitter the other day, but there shouldn't be any women at the Olympics. I mean, the Olympics
I
you
don't think
generally,
women belong in sports. I'm with
right.
you.
I mean, women shouldn't be in sports at all. I mean, yeah, the local intramural level for like, but competition is a fundamentally different thing, both internally and externally for men, uh,
Hmm.
and and for society. And it's male competition that drives society, that matters for society. And this idea that women should play competitive sports at any relevant level is just silly.
Well,
It's
at the
certainly,
very least, any combat sport should not include women.
yeah. I
It's
mean that.
very uncomfortable. I watch UFC all the time, and it's very uncomfortable watching a woman get hit in the face, even if it's by another woman.
Yeah, and that's just atrocious. I mean, yeah, that stuff should be instantly banned.
Right.
But, unfortunately, I'm not yet in power. Soon, though, maybe by 2028.
Yeah. But you're not that odd because I feel the same way. Like I'm like I watch it, I'm like,
I
this is
mean,
terrible.
it's the reality-based view. You have to basically suspend your belief in reality to think that women should be certainly in combat sports. I mean, that's the most kind of egregious example.
Yeah.
It just, anyway. So there you go.
Okay. Well, we have covered the spectrum, and it's been an hour, so I don't want to keep you too long. So plug away, man. Oh, we froze. I hate it when that happens.
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit
Yeah, no, we had
for a second.
a freezing malfunction. Yeah, plug away, man. I think we've
Well,
covered pretty much
Charles
everything.
Haywood, I mean, yeah, I've been here before and I always enjoy being on your show. I appreciate the invite. I write at theworthyhouse.com where I write different things. And I'm also on X at the Worthy House, where I have taken to giving predictions and hot takes, which I never used to do and will probably regret it. But for now, I'm doing predictions.
All right, man. Well, I'm going to end the recording. I appreciate you coming on as always, and we will do this
Awesome.
again very soon.
Thank you.